Good morning. It's good to see you here. If you're a guest, my name is Chris. I'm the pastor at Christian Chapel, and we're thrilled that you're with us on Easter. During Lent this year, which is the 40 days leading up to Easter, we've been working our way through Psalm 23. It's written by King David, one of the greatest kings of Israel, and Psalm 23 is a description of what life looks like when we have completely surrendered to the Lord and taken our place in His kingdom. And so each week, as a way for us to try to internalize the message of Psalm 23, we've been reading that together. So if you don't mind reading along with me, we'll start there in verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, David, in this last verse, is where we are this morning. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And in this last verse, he addresses a tension that all of us live with, and that's what these are going to help us. We're not actually having an Easter hula hoop contest, so sorry to those of you who have not had an opportunity to show off your hula hoop skills since elementary school. You're going to have to keep those in the closet for a few more weeks at least. So, out of curiosity, though, how many of you are good at hula hooping? Don't be shy. Raise your hand, honestly. If you're going to lie about it, I mean, gosh, it's Easter. Come on. All right, how many of you are bad at hula hooping? How many of you have never hula hooped? We just want to see who had the saddest childhood. Anybody? Okay, so everyone's at least tried, right? That makes me feel better. For some reason, the Christian Chapel staff are inordinately good at hula hooping, with the exception of me. I feel like the clumsy, so I make up excuses to them of like, well, if I wasn't praying and reading my Bible so much, maybe I'd be better at hula hooping. But, just when in doubt, make yourself look holier instead of uncoordinated and lacking rhythm. So that's it. But that's not it. For this morning, what I want us to think about is David, in this last part of Psalm 23, is navigating a tension for us of our desire to experience the goodness of God right here and right now. So that's what this hoop is going to represent. And our desire to know that we are secure with Him forever. Right, so there are terms that our society has used to describe people who live in both of these extremes. And so over here on the now extreme, right, people who just live right here in this moment, we would call them hedonists. Right, their motto is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Right? And so the hedonist celebration of Easter or another holiday would be, hey, let's spend all the money that we want to have the biggest party, the best food, the best candy. Let's. It doesn't matter. Forget the clearance rack. Forget Ross. Forget half of half. You just go all out, spend all the money to get all the family in the coordinating clothes so that we can get the perfect picture with the bunny. This is we are living for here and now. And some of you husbands, I see you looking at your wife and you're like, hedonist. That's not it. But there is this desire. We want to live here and now. And honestly, this is where most of our culture spends most of their time, is in this kind of now experience. We want pleasure, we want gratification, and we want it now. We want the good life right here in this space. But then there's this other idea that we come to, and it's the forever idea. That yes, we know we live in that space, we live here, but there's always something in our hearts that is thinking about forever. And so as you look across the religions, the philosophies of the world, there's always this idea that there's something beyond this life. Right? And the people who dedicate themselves most to the forever circle, we would call them ascetics, right? So you can think of monks across different religious systems, men and women who have chosen to remove themselves from society. In many ways, they have rejected most of the pleasures and comforts that the hedonist would embrace, and they've said, no, for the sake of forever, I'm going to turn my back on the pleasures of now. And so the ascetic approach to Easter would be, I'm going to wear the same old clothes I've always worn. I'm going to eat leftovers from yesterday as a way of celebrating, and in some way, this is going to get me closer to forever, right? And this is where some of the wives look at their husbands and think, you're an ascetic, right? You've been wearing the same Easter shirt for 10 years now, and you won't, And so we just live in this tension, and most of us spend our lives, and even as followers of Christ, we spend our lives walking back and forth between these two spots. Sometimes it's a day-by-day experience of we're living for the now, and then the next moment we're living for forever. But what I want us to look at this morning, we're going to see how David in Psalm 23 and Jesus in a couple other passages teach us that Jesus, when he is our shepherd, when he's the one who leads us and guides us, that he comes to give us an experience of the good life now and the good life forever. That we don't have to choose between one or the other. Right? And so we'll start with that idea of the good life now. Now, most of us, we view this experience, if this is where we want to live, in the good life right here in this moment, as something that we have to pursue ourselves. Right? You've got to go get it if that's what you want. This is why some of you this morning, you woke up and you drank a spinach smoothie. Because you're trying to look good now. Others of you woke up and you ate a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. Because you want it to taste good now, right? Both are a way that we are pursuing the good life right here in this space. That's why some of you got up early and you worked out or you went for a run because you're trying to experience that good life now. Some of you slept in late because that's the good life now, right? Getting to not even set the alarm, just sleep till you wake up. We have this experience in the way that we save and we plan for the future. We're trying to make sure the good life now, the good life the next day or the day after that. This is why we spend money on vacations. It's why we buy homes and stuff and all these things to have this experience of the good life now. But almost universally, we view the good life as something that we have to reach out and grab onto for ourselves. This is where Psalm 23 is helpful for us. What David says is that when we have surrendered to the Lord as our shepherd, his goodness will follow us all the days of our life. And that term, follow, can also be translated pursue. What David is saying is that every person is being chased by the goodness and the love of God. God is running after you, moving towards you so that you will experience his grace, experience his goodness, and experience his love. Now, I don't know if you have a lot of experience being pursued, but what I want you to think of with me is if you ever go over here to the mall, the Woodland Hills Mall around Christmas time, and you're on that lower level, or this is probably universal to most malls in the United States, those lower levels, and they are filled down the center with all of those kiosks, right? And as you walk down the kiosk, those salesmen try to sell you what they have. But they're not just passively sitting there looking at their phones and hoping you come up. They will chase you down as you walk through, right? So, and they're saying, hey, sir, ma'am. And it's fine when they're trying to sell you the drone or the remote-controlled car or something like that. Like that I get, not offensive at all. It gets a little offensive, though, when you're walking down the middle and they're like, hey, you look like you need our wrinkle cream. Like, really? You look like you need to be hit in the face. Why don't we see which one happens first? Or you're walking down the line, we've got a thing for gray hair. This weight loss pill will work. And you're just like, what are you? But they're persistent and they keep chasing after you, right? They are pursuing you. The difference is they're pursuing you because they want something from you. Right? They want to get your money. But imagine a world where the kiosk salesman actually delivers on his promise. That the wrinkle cream actually does eliminate the wrinkles. That the pill actually does turn whatever food you eat into lean muscle mass. And not only that, but imagine you're walking there saying, hey, let me give you this, and it's free. It's totally free too. This gets us closer to what David is describing here. The goodness of the Lord pursues us. It runs after us. Or maybe think of a parent who is parenting a toddler. Now, if you have a child that age, you know a good portion of your life is spent pursuing that child, right? You are chasing them down to change their diaper. You are chasing them down to get them in normal clothes before you go out in public. You're chasing them down to get the Legos out of their mouth before you have to go to the hospital, right? You're chasing them down to get them to the table to eat food, to get them in the car to go someplace fun, to save them before they dart out into the busy street. And this is how God pursues us. He pursues us to give good things to us. James tells us in James chapter 1 that every good gift comes from the Lord. And he pours these gifts out on all of humanity, whether we follow him or not. So it doesn't matter if you are a Christian. It doesn't matter if you worship Jesus, if you've surrendered your life to the Lord. None of those things matter. God is actively pouring out his goodness and love into your life. And he's doing that in hopes that your experiences of these good things will turn your attention towards him as the giver of all good things. And no matter what your response to him might be, if you turn away from him, if you reject him, if we say, yeah, I want your stuff, but I don't want you, God's response is never to say, that's fine, then I'm done with you, good luck on your own. But his response is to continually move towards us. Max Lucado wrote a book on Psalm 23, and in the section where he's commenting on this last verse, he said, God gives us himself. Even when we choose our hovel over his house and our trash over his grace, still he follows. Never forcing us, never leaving us, patiently persistent, faithfully present, using all of his power to convince us that he is who he is and that he can be trusted to lead us home. See, God's response to us and what we celebrate on Easter Sunday is that even when we turn our back on God, his response was not to turn his back on us, but instead to move towards us. And when he's poured out his goodness and love on our lives and we've turned away from it, he doesn't then withdraw it, but instead he continues to pour it out in hopes that we will turn our hearts back to him. When we begin to understand that the goodness, the love of God pursues us, then we see that no matter what our circumstance is, no matter what situation we find ourselves in this morning, God's goodness is still going to come. His love is still going to be unveiled in our life. This is what enabled David to say after he wrote Psalm 23, he writes, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. You see, for a lot of Christians, we're living over here in the now, and we're thinking, I've just got to survive now, and then one day, life will be good. And then one day I'll die, and I'll go to heaven, and everything will be fine, and everything will be comfortable. But what the Scriptures are teaching us is God's goodness is supposed to be experienced now. When Jesus comes, he's not just coming for forever. But he's coming for now. He's coming to invade your relationships and pour out his goodness. He's coming to move in your workspace as a demonstration of his love. His kingdom is not just about what happens after you die, but it's about what happens right here. And that's exactly what David means when he says, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. It means he is my shepherd. He knows my needs, and he has promised not just to meet them by just enough, but in abundance. And every longing of my heart, he has promised to fulfilled. This is what it means to trust him in the now. And yet, even in that now, as we experience the goodness of the Lord, we start to look towards the forever. Right? And David finishes with that line, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, David had a son named Solomon, and Solomon became king after David. Solomon is remembered as the wisest king of Israel, and he wrote a book called Ecclesiastes. And in Ecclesiastes 3, Solomon says that God has put eternity in the human heart, that he's placed this desire for forever in us. And so you and I have that. We stand in the now, and even when we experience the goodness of God, the temporary experiences do not fully and finally satisfy us, because here in the now, we always have this idea, but there's something more. There's got to be something that lasts longer. So we're experiencing the goodness at work. We're experiencing it in our relationships. We are experiencing His love and His care, and yet there's always this thought of, but what happens after? What about after I die? Is there any of this that's going to matter after I'm gone? And as we begin to think about these things, it reveals to us our need for a forever kind of answer. I read an article a couple weeks ago that said by 2020, there will be more people on earth over 65 years old than under 5 years old. And it's the first time since they've been tracking that we will have such a large population of older people on the earth. And so what I anticipate we'll see then in the coming decades is an increase in books and articles and movies and writings and stories about death. Because we all know the older we get, the more we tend to be confronted by our mortality. And what we'll find is, I think you'll find a lot of stories of people saying, I chased this and I chased that and I did this and I did that, and none of it brought the lasting significance and meaning that I longed for. And as we as a culture kind of walk into this space as followers of Jesus, that doesn't take us by surprise at all. Because God has put eternity in our hearts. He's put this longing there. C.S. Lewis wrote about this idea. He said, if I find in myself a desire for which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. You see, because God has set eternity in our hearts, because He's made us for forever, we're never going to be satisfied just with now. Now, the reason that there's this gap in between the two is because of our sin. When God creates humanity, there is not an idea of now and forever. Right? It's just now, forever. The two are one. It is one continual plane of existence with God. But when we sin, death enters into the equation and it adds the and in the middle. There is now and forever, and these two become separated. And so God's response to that, again, is not to leave us in the darkness, but it's to send Jesus to us. Jesus tells us in John's gospel, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. Jesus comes to take care of this space in between. He comes to show us that through Him, you can have the good life now, you can have the good life forever, and these two can be congruent. You don't have to say, well, I don't know about that, so I'm just going to live here, right now. And we don't have to say, like many Christians have done, well, I know about forever, so I'm going to put all my hope there, and I'm going to forget the now. And all my focus will be on heaven and be on what is to come. But Jesus comes, He says, I am the resurrection and the life. I've taken care of this, and I am taking care of that. I am the Lord of both spaces. When we begin to understand that, it really does change the way that we understand Psalm 23, verse 6. The resurrection turns these two lines into one promise. You know, for most of us, we read that and we think, your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. That's the promise for now. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord, and that's the promise for forever. But if Jesus is the resurrection and the life, then it means that surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. It means all the days of my life are not these 70, 80, 90 years that I get over here. But all the days of my life, when I'm following the one who is the resurrection and the life, is every day from here until forever. That all of these have been made into one. Right? Death is just a blip, just a momentary occurrence in our life with Christ. It does not interrupt us, and it does not separate us from Him. And so your goodness and love all the days of my life is all the days now and all the days forever. And then there's that line, I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I don't know about you, but the house of the Lord means different things to different people. The time that I would typically hear it when I was growing up was usually when I was goofing around inside a church, right? Don't do that in the house of the Lord. Like there's no running. There was no yelling in the house of the Lord. There was really the lesson I learned from a few people is there's no fun in the house of the Lord. Just if it's fun, it's clearly not for here. Take it outside, right? And so we have this idea. Well, for David, when he says, I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever, his idea was a temple or a tabernacle. David longed to build a temple for the Lord. He wanted to build this huge, elaborate structure where the nation of Israel could worship the Lord. He wanted to move it out of the tabernacle, this tent where the Ark of the Covenant and all these symbols of their history and their interactions with God resided. He wanted to build a permanent home, but God never allowed him to do that. David's son Solomon does come along and he builds the huge temple, the house of the Lord. And from Solomon's time till the time of Jesus, the temple is the place where God's presence dwelled in a special way. It was where they offered their sacrifices. It was where they celebrated their holy days. The house of the Lord was a place. And then Jesus comes along and he, in the same way he changes our understanding about life, he begins to change our understanding about the presence of God in the house of the Lord. You can read in John's gospel as well, John chapter 2, Jesus goes to the temple one day and it's full of people changing money and they're buying and they're selling and they're making it difficult for poor people to worship Jesus or to worship God. And so Jesus' response is to begin going through the temple and he's flipping over tables and he's driving people out of it. The religious leaders come to him and they say, "By what authority are you doing these things?" And this is Jesus' response. It says, Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that were spoken. What Jesus is telling us is, look, you've had this understanding of the temple is a place and the temple is a space and it's somewhere that you go to experience the power and the presence of the Lord. But I'm telling you now, I am the temple. And my power, my presence is where God resides. It is where God dwells. And so when David writes, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever," Jesus comes and actualizes that promise for us. And what it means for you and me today is to dwell in the house of the Lord forever is to live in the presence of Jesus right now and forever. What Jesus does is he takes these two separate spheres of existence. He takes the now with all of our life, with all of our concern, with everything we're doing, where we're saying, "God, please pour out your goodness and love." And he takes the forever, the what happens after I die, what happens when I don't know anymore, and he brings them all in together, and he says, "Now in me, this is one way of life. All the days of your life." I mean, all of these and all of those. And the presence of the Lord means there and it means here. See, the resurrection of Jesus is the point in history where the now and the forever are brought back together. Through his death and resurrection, he has destroyed the and. He's destroyed the division. And he's said, "My kingdom has broken into your world. And so now you, as my people, can live in a way now that is congruent with the way you will live forever." This is why, as followers of Christ, our lives should be defined by our enjoyment of the goodness of God in the world. Our lives should be defined by overwhelming generosity, by overwhelming love and concern for others. This is what motivates Christian action, the belief that I can behave, I can live, I can give, I can serve in ways right now in 2018 that are congruent with how I will live forever with Jesus Christ. It is the melding of two lives. And Jesus, as the resurrected one, is the only one who can offer this to us. He's the only one who has walked through death and come back on the other side, full of life and inviting us to follow him. And so this morning on Easter, we don't just celebrate something that happened, but we celebrate the resurrection as something that is still happening, something that Jesus is doing in us as he overcomes the distance between now and forever through his sacrifice, through his resurrection, and he's inviting us into it. And as he's pouring out his goodness on us again this morning, we have a choice to make. Do we choose to let these two different styles of life, the now and forever, do we choose to let Jesus bring them together and surrender to his kingdom and his plan? Or do we continue to try to navigate them separately on our own, thinking, I'll take care of the now, and I'll worry about the forever later? Dallas Willard wrote a book on Psalm 23 that we've referenced several times called Life Without Lack. And he ends it with this description of the choice that each of us face. He says, you cannot drift into a life of constant companionship with Jesus any more than you can drift into marriage. You must make the decision to have Jesus with you. A decision is an inward resolve to do whatever is necessary to bring something to pass. And then he tells a story of if you want to go to Hawaii. He says, so make your plans. You want to go to Hawaii. Well, you're not just going to show up on the beach. You're going to have to do some things to get from where you are to where you want to be. You're going to have to buy the plane ticket. You have to arrange for a place to stay. You're going to have to determine who's coming with you. You're going to have to pack your clothes to go. And then when all that's done, you're going to have to drive yourself to the airport, get on the plane, and fly to your destination. He says it's the same with spending time with Jesus. You must decide to do it. And God has poured out his goodness on us. He has poured out his love to us. He has promised that this will not just be our experience now, but also forever. And yet he leaves us with a choice. Will you choose to walk in this new way of life? If you go back to John chapter 11, the story we read earlier, we read a little segment from it where Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. The larger context of that is Jesus has shown up at the house of some people that he loves. Two ladies named Martha and Mary, and their brother Lazarus has died. And so Jesus shows up, and Martha says to Jesus, Lord, if you had come earlier, my brother would not have died. And Jesus tells her, he's just sleeping. He's not dead. He will live. And Martha responds, she says, yes, I know. He will live at the resurrection. Martha's still operating in a now and forever mindset. And so in the now, she's mourning the death of her brother. But she doesn't want to be totally faithless, so she says, yes, Jesus, I know. Over here, forever, he will be resurrected. And that's where Jesus makes this statement, I am the resurrection and the life. And he's pointing her and he's pointing us towards this idea of the resurrection is not just an event that will happen, but the resurrection is Jesus Christ. Now, we get the benefit of reading this story knowing the full story. We know the story of Jesus' resurrection himself, but at this point, Martha doesn't know any of that. So Jesus tells her, I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he asks her, do you believe this? And this is Martha's moment. This is the moment you and I are at this morning. Do you believe this? This is what the scriptures tell us. Now and forever have been brought back together. But do you believe it? And as you read through that story, it's so encouraging for us because Martha, she expresses her belief. She says, I believe you're the Messiah. I believe you're the Son of God. But Jesus doesn't tell her, great, then go raise Lazarus. She says, I believe you're the Messiah. I believe you're the Son of God. And Jesus gets up to walk out to Lazarus' tomb, and Martha follows him. Right? When we express our belief in Jesus, he's not saying, now go do it all on your own. Now get to forever through your effort and your work. But instead what he's saying is, walk with me. Follow me. I am your shepherd. I will lead you. I will guide you. I will provide for you. I will protect you. Just follow me. And so Martha follows Jesus out to the tomb. And they stand there, and Lazarus has been dead for 3 days, and he tells them to roll back the stone. And they object, and they say, Jesus, it's going to stink. He says, roll it back. The stone is rolled back, and with a word, Lazarus comes back to life. And he comes walking out of that grave, and he's covered in his grave clothes. And in that moment, Martha begins to understand. In that moment, you and I begin to understand what it means for Jesus to be the resurrection and the life. It's not just the promise that he'll be with us after we die. It's that he's going to bring life right now, that he's going to bring life forever, and that death itself has no power over us. God has set eternity in our hearts. That's why you have those thoughts when you're driving down the road of there's got to be more than this. That's why you have those nights when you lay on your pillow and you can't go to sleep because it just seems like there's not any meaning to this. I'm just a hamster on the wheel, just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And just like Martha in those moments, we're confronted with the reality. He is the resurrection and the life. He's the one who brings significance and meaning to these moments. He's the one who brings eternal significance and meaning after death. He's the one who brings us back to an experience of living now forever. And that's the invitation he leaves us with. And when we accept it, and when we get up like Martha did and just begin to follow him, then we can say with David, with absolute confidence, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Not because of what I've done, not because of what you've done, but because of what Christ has provided for us. He's made the way. The path is clear. He knows where he's going, and now he's extending his hand to us and saying, follow me. I will lead you, I will guide you, I will provide for you. And then the ball is left in our court to decide. Will I keep trying to do it on my own? Or will I surrender and will I take my place as his child, as his son, as his daughter? Will I recognize that he is the shepherd of my life, the one who is ridiculously in charge, the one who sees my beginning and sees all the way through my end? And will I trust that he's going to lead me on the right path, that he's going to provide for me along the way, that when I need deliverance, he's going to bring it. When I need protection, he's going to be strong enough. And like Martha, we just faced that choice of, Lord, I believe you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God. And it's one thing to acknowledge it, but then Martha had to get up out of the house and follow Jesus to the tomb. And so for some of you this morning, what it's going to be is you're going to acknowledge it this morning. I believe he's the Messiah. I believe he's the Son of God. But from there, he's going to take you and he's going to lead you to the tomb. He's going to lead you to your sin. He's going to lead you to your addiction. He's going to lead you to your pain. He's going to lead you to your shame. He's going to lead you to those things that have been done to you or things that you've done to other people. And in that space of deadness and grief and mourning, he's going to speak life. He's going to speak resurrection. He's going to raise up dead dreams. He's going to restore broken relationships. And you're going to begin to understand that salvation in Christ is not just for forever, but it's also for now. Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Lord, you see our needs. You see the things that each of us are dealing with. You see our successes and our struggles. And Lord, I pray this morning that you would help each of us to know that you have been pouring out your goodness on our lives. You have been pouring out your love. That even as we look back at the dark valleys we have walked through, even as we look back at the difficult seasons, the horrible things that have happened, Lord, we can see even there your goodness and love were being poured out into us. So Jesus, we ask this morning that you would bring your salvation into our now, into this moment and into this space. Speak words of life and resurrection. Lord, I pray for those who have just suffered from addiction. This morning, may your resurrection power bring freedom to them. Pray for those who are crushed by broken relationships. This morning, may your resurrection power speak restoration and reconciliation. Jesus, I pray for those who are crushed by the weight of their sin, who are held back by the heaviness of their doubts. This morning, may your voice speak freedom and faith to their hearts. Lord, as we stand to follow you, may your Spirit invade our lives here. May the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead now dwell in us. And may you enable us to live a now, forever life. We ask it by the power of your Spirit. We ask it in the name of our resurrected Savior. Amen. Will you stand with me? The band's going to lead us in a final song this morning. As they do, if you'd like someone to join with you about either surrendering to Jesus for the first time and taking those first steps on the path he's laying out for you, or maybe you're just in a space where you really need to know his goodness, you need to know his love, you need assurance that he is with you. As we sing this last song, if you'll head out the back doors and to the left, some of our pastors and prayer team members will be waiting to pray with you in the prayer room. They'll direct you to it as you head out. We want to take that moment to seal what God is speaking to you this morning. The rest of us, we're going to sing this last song just as an acknowledgement of our response. When we see God for who he is, our response is one of absolute surrender